All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome everyone to today's Explainer. Now today we're tackling something that feels, well, incredibly urgent, and frankly, a little daunting. We're going to unpack the architecture of global conflict. We'll be digging into the massive, historical, structural forces that are currently pushing our world toward war, and crucially, the totally unprecedented modern deterrents that are pulling us back from the edge.
I want to start right off the bat with this seriously haunting question, which is pulled directly from our source material. Are we in the early stages of a global conflict? It's that question you kind of feel lingering in the background of almost every international news story today. But instead of just reacting to the daily headlines, we're going to look under the hood. We'll examine the underlying mechanics, the deep history, the military realities, and those complex economic webs that will ultimately answer this question for us.
So, here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. Number 1. The brink of conflict. 2. The Thucydides trap. 3. Flashpoints and blocks. 4. The nuclear wildcard. And finally, 5. The economic shield. We're going to map out both the historical gravity of our situation and the modern safety nets keeping us safe.
Section 1. The brink of conflict. Where we are today. Let's just move right in and establish exactly where things stand on the global stage right now.
To really ground us, let's look at this assessment from military veteran Mark Wales, who compares our current geopolitical vibe to the early months of World War II. He points out something kind of chilling. In April 1940, the war had technically been underway for 6 months, but the major powers weren't fully engaged yet. Germany had taken Poland, Japan was in parts of China, but the US wasn't in it, and the Eastern Front hadn't even opened. Wales suggests we might be in a similar sort of phony war period right now, where we have these multiple regional conflicts sparking, but the overarching global superpower clash, that hasn't fully ignited yet.
Section 2. The Thucydides trap, a historical theory. So to understand why a superpower clash is such a huge concern right now, we have to look at a theory popularized by Graham Allison.
The Thucydides trap. This concept actually originates all the way back with the ancient Greek historian Thucydides. He basically observed that the rapid rise of Athens and the fear that caused in Sparta made war inevitable. The absolutely crucial thing to remember here is that this is not about moral judgments. It's not good guys versus bad guys. It's pure, objective structural reality. It's that intense, unavoidable stress that builds up like a pressure cooker when a rapidly rising power demands more influence and the established ruling power feels insecure and wants to defend the status quo. Now, what is truly striking, and honestly pretty terrifying, is the sheer historical weight behind this dynamic. Graham Allison's research team at Harvard dug into the last 500 years of history and found 16 distinct cases where a rising power threatened to displace a ruling power. And out of those 16 cases, in 12 of them, the result was war. From the Habsburgs and the French in the 16th century, right up to the rise of Germany before World War I. Historically speaking, when power shifts this dramatically, kinetic warfare is by far the most common outcome.
And that brings us to today, perfectly illustrating the scale of the power shift happening between China and the United States. Literally never before in history has a nation risen so far, so fast. Back in 1980, China's economy was a fraction of the US, just 7% of America's GDP at exchange rates. But by 2014, in just a single generation, China hit 60% of US GDP and actually surpassed the US in purchasing power parity. They went from having an economy smaller than the Netherlands to becoming the main engine of global growth. It's staggering.
Take a look at the sheer number of key indicators where China has systematically overtaken the US. They've become the world's top manufacturer, the largest exporter, the biggest trading nation. It's exactly this trajectory, a rising power objectively catching up to and then passing the established power, that fuels the dangerous structural stress of that Thucydides trap we just talked about.
Section 3. Flashpoints and blocks. The global tinderbox. So how is this historical theory actually playing out in the real world right now? Let's take a look at the current geopolitical tinderbox.
Right now, as we speak, we are seeing multiple active theaters of conflict happening simultaneously. We've got a massive, grinding war in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. We have a highly volatile, multi-front conflict in the Middle East with Israel, Hezbollah, Iran, and Syria. But the most significant potential flashpoint of all, that's Taiwan. Our sources make it clear that whoever controls Taiwan essentially controls the geopolitical center of gravity. And with Chinese President Xi Jinping officially ordering his forces to be ready to reclaim the island by 2027, well, that makes Taiwan the ultimate stress test for the US-China relationship.
Because of all these flashpoints, we're watching the world rapidly consolidate into opposing blocs.
On one side, you've got NATO expanding and the AUKUS alliance transferring advanced nuclear subs to Australia to project power in the Pacific. But on the other side, we're seeing deep cooperation in a totally different bloc. North Korea just deployed up to 10,000 troops to support Russia, Iran is handing over drone tech, and China is providing massive economic lifelines. These blocs are teaming up militarily, economically, politically, effectively setting the stage for a much larger interconnected global friction.
Now, if we were living in 1914, that exact setup would mean an immediate world war. No question. But we aren't. Section 4. The nuclear wildcard. Mutually assured.
The invention of nuclear weapons fundamentally, permanently changed the calculus of human conflict. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, means that a war between major powers isn't a struggle for global dominance anymore. It is a literal guarantee of mutual annihilation. If you pull the trigger, there is no victory lap. You just ensure your own destruction right alongside your enemies.
And the actual models for this are truly horrifying. Nuclear planners and researchers like Daniel Ellsberg and Annie Jacobson have documented that even a limited nuclear exchange almost always escalates. The ash and soot blasted into the atmosphere wouldn't just wipe out cities, it would block out the sun. We are talking freezing daylight temperatures for years, a decade-long global famine, and quite literally, the potential end of the human species. This terrifying reality forces today's leaders to be infinitely more cautious than anyone in 1914 or 1939 ever had to be.
Section 5. The Economic Shield. Global Interdependence. But fear of the apocalypse isn't the only thing keeping the peace. We also have a very practical, highly modern safety net.
Geopolitical strategist Parag Khanna points out something super important. Unlike the US and the Soviet Union back in the Cold War, today's rivals are deeply invested in each other's success. We can call this the economic shield. It works through three main mechanisms. First, massive trade interdependence. Second, financial integration, meaning we hold massive amounts of each other's debt. And third, supply chain dispersal. We literally manufacture our goods inside the borders of our biggest rivals. This creates a wildly stark contrast between military posturing and actual economic reality. Just think about the everyday products you buy. A giant like Walmart, America's largest retailer, relies heavily on China for its revenue and its supply chains. The vast majority of American Fortune 500 companies generate massive revenues from abroad. So leaders looking at the global chessboard know that starting an all-out kinetic war means instantly destroying their own economies and the very companies that sustain their national wealth. It makes the cost-benefit analysis of war astronomically high.
So we arrive at this incredibly delicate balance. It's like a giant scale. On one side, we have 500 years of human history. The Thucydides trap telling us that the structural friction between a rising China and an established US naturally, inevitably pulls us toward war. But on the other side of that scale, we have deterrents that have literally never existed before in human history. The absolute existential terror of mutually assured destruction and the deep, tangled, vital web of global economic supply chains. Which leaves us with this final, profound question to think about. Which force is ultimately going to win out? Will the historical gravity of the last 500 years pull us right over the brink? Or will the terrifying reality of nuclear weapons and the modern shield of global trade be strong enough to finally break the Thucydides trap? It really is the defining question of our generation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.